show it's 1:01. We'll go ahead and call the regular trustee meeting January 20th, 2015 to order, and we'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have a moment of silence, Mr. Little?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry?
We'll just do a moment of silence for Mr. Little. Thank you. We have an agenda before us. Are there any additions, deletions, changes to the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxson,
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
Move to approve the payroll in January 22nd, 2015, in the amount of $280,000, $538.68.
Second.
Mr. Paxson,
Yes.
Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
Move to approve the bills in the amount of $272,864.87.
Second.
Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxson,
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes. This time, we'll open up to any citizens that are interested in speaking. Seeing none, we'll move on to old business. Employee recognition program, Mr. Amrine.
I have put the resolution that I emailed you in the form, or the proclamation language I emailed to you, I put it in the form of a resolution with some minor edits. Just a brief introduction, if you don't mind. The recognition, the Employee Recognition Program Committee, in addition to completing the process for nominating an Employee of the Year who will be honored at the Beavercreek Chamber of Commerce annual dinner on the 30th, also felt that it was important to recognize the accomplishments of other members of the township staff for the accomplishments of the year 2014, which presented each of us a certain interesting set of challenges, if you will. And so our suggestion to the trustees is to, by resolution, issue a proclamation of gratitude to the departments and staff of Beavercreek Township in the form that I've submitted there. And you had a draft that's substantially the same as that in your packets. So.
And this is, Chairman, this is separate from anything that we would do for Ms. White. And
Yes.
this is separate from what we had discussed as far as Mr. Barone.
Yes.
Okay.
The overall policy, the employee recognition policy that you approved on September 29th allows for a variety of different kinds of awards. Given the lateness of our meeting following the conclusion of the performance audit and follow-up to that, our committee didn't get started until very late in the year, actually beyond our own deadline of November 1st. So we didn't have time to really go through the policy and present to you an array of individual awards as we might do in the next year and the year following that. But we felt that and we hope that you'll appreciate the opportunity to express gratitude to all the staff who worked so hard this past year, 2014. There were a number of accomplishments in a number of different departments that we thought deserved public mention.
What it reminded me of is that it's like the state of the township. And you have listed, as what they do for the state of the union, state of the city, what has, the things that did take place in 2014. I think it's a good thing to do, even in addition to recognizing individuals, because it does
Right.
show that we
Right.
did many things this year, and all of our people are doing excellent work.
As this evolved, putting this particular resolution evolved, and department heads were asked to share either important accomplishments of the year or particular challenges overcome, that thought emerged in our minds as well, in the minds of the committee too, that it's kind of an important, could be an important overview of what happened in the township during the year. So we hope it'll,
Excellent. Here, I haven't read this one.
we hope that it'll serve that purpose in your minds as well.
So if you'd like me to read the entire thing, or just,
If so inclined, we make a motion to approve the proclamation, and then we can second and discuss if we need to.
move to approve the proclamation of thanks to all township departments and personnel for exceptional performance during 2014, as presented by the Employees Recognition Committee.
Thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Graf?
Yes?
Mr. Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Kratz?
Yes. Good job. And pass on our appreciation to the committee.
I will distribute it to
You need to,
staff.
you need to email that to me, please.
Yes,
So I
of
can
course,
put it in
of
the-
course. For a resolution number 2.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. New business, we had none added. Administrator, which is, we'll excuse Mr. Zaharia, but his replacement, chief.
I certainly cannot replace Mr. Terry.
All right, temporary interim.
Yes, sir, and I will actually deflect this. I believe this was an issue that was brought up, was presented by Mr. Graff to Mr. Zaharia in regards to the tax revenue collections.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to have to find my motion. Okay, just give me a second here. Okay. Other jurisdictions, cities, do this at a regular basis, and the library does it on a regular basis. What this would be is requesting of the county auditor, as they receive the monies from those of us who are paying our taxes, they don't keep it for 2 months, but they distribute it on a regular, like a weekly basis. The advantage of that is when we get the money, we get the interest. When the county keeps the money, the county gets the interest on our money. So I would move, this is my motion. The Board of Beavercreek Township Trustees requests that the Greene County Auditor send advance draws against Beavercreek Township's levy revenues to Beavercreek Township as permitted by law.
On what cycle? On a weekly cycle or on a?
As permitted by
permitted
law,
by-
as they,
Okay, because the current scenario is permitted by law. We're asking them to accelerate that.
yes. That's what I said, advance draws. So the advance draws,
Okay.
I want to say as received, but evidently this was sufficient for the libraries to get its money, so I figured it'd be sufficient for the
Okay.
township.
So I'll ask Mr. Barone.
I have a
You need a
motion.
second.
Do we want to second it first before we discuss it?
I'll second.
Thank you. Advances, yeah.
Discussion, so-
Beavercreek Township has never asked for advances. Advances are something that has been available to any jurisdiction, and we've not had a discussion about advances. don't believe Ms. Graff's had a discussion with Ms. Aarons about advances. Beavercreek Township has never needed to do advances, so we've just never done it.
Okay.
They will give you an advance weekly, and then they will take that off of your collections in March. So you will receive your check less the advances that you received. So when I do the settlement, then I would do it less the advances. It's never been done here, so I don't.
So it's a true advance?
It's an advance on the collection.
It's not a as received, an electronic push?
It's an advance.
Okay. And
If I
so,
understand, Ms. Graff right, then.
Yeah, we end
They're
up
getting
getting the
they're-
same amount of money at the
Yeah,
end.
But they're getting interest off.
right,
Oh, yes.
our money.
Our money versus us getting the interest. Whatever it is, $1 million here, $1 million there, a couple of cents here comes. I mean, we are concerned about having greater expenses than actual revenues in our general fund. And this may not be much, but it is one thing that would add to our revenues that we didn't have before.
Right, with your experience with the library or other organization, or other municipalities that do this, is there any administrative fee for the advance,
No.
Mr. Boyle?
No, the administrative fee would be the same for processing the settlement that they charge anyway.
Okay.
Collections close typically, I believe.
1% or 2% or something.
Yeah, I believe collections close, and I don't know, because I pay my property taxes through my house payment, but I think it's
February 20th,
February.
we haven't gotten the bills yet, but
Right.
no later than February 20th. Our
We've-
bills should be coming out soon.
Mr. Graham has processed that check. We've had it by the second week of March, ever since I've been here. So you're really not even talking less than a month for them to have your money. So it's just never really been something that the township has done. Not that they can't do it. It's just not been a necessity. I don't know that there's any general fund money invested that's going to collect the extra interest anyway. That the fund is the one that's spending more than it's bringing in. So I don't. This is the first I've heard that this was a discussion we were going to have today. So I'm not prepared to.
If I'm correct, most of the monies that we have, when they are invested, the interest, regardless of which fund, except for one road fund, I think, goes into the general fund.
As long as the
So
fund
whatever
is-
interest is
Right.
generated essentially goes into general fund.
So you're really making, fire fund is really the one that's got most of the money that's being invested. They're not getting the interest.
Right, they wouldn't get it
Get
anyway.
credit towards our cost allocation.
I'd like
Cost
to have
interest.
So essentially, it gives us roughly a 30-day advance throughout the year.
Yeah.
On
If
the
you-
money
unless
we
unless
would-
Twice
people-
a year.
unless
Twice a
people-
year, I'm
Twice a
sorry.
year, unless people
Okay.
pay their significant amount of their taxes early. I don't know that
Okay.
it's gonna amount to be that much money, but like I said, I didn't know we were having the discussion. I could have called and asked the auditor, what they had and what they usually typically collect early, and I didn't do any of that.
If the other jurisdictions did, if it wasn't beneficial, I don't think they'd do it. So I would assume, since there's so many that do it, there must be a reason and a rationale, because they will all get the same distribution time
Okay.
and the collection, so.
Chief, did we have any comments from Mr. Zahariff on this topic?
No, sir.
Okay. And timing-wise, if we approve this motion today, would we be in time for the February, March cycle?
I have not asked Mr. Graham when his deadline to ask for advances is. Like I said, I didn't know. we were
The
having-
tax bills haven't been sent out yet.
Okay.
At least I haven't gotten my tax bill.
Do you know?
And
what
I
the-
get it at home.
Do you know what the deadline is at the auditor's office for asking for advances?
No.
Okay, and I don't either. So I
The
don't.
library did it last Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't know what the deadline is, Mr. Kretz. So.
Okay. My question was related to if we had time to wait to the February 2nd meeting, or if we needed to do it today to beat the deadline. So,
Right.
because I assume those bills are going to go out by the end of this month.
Yeah. What's the downside of not asking for it?
I haven't heard one yet. So if there's no administrative cost, and it's just simply we have the money 30 days or more sooner than we would have had it, and we have the ability to at least accrue interest, I don't see a downside, so. What are your thoughts?
I don't know, I would like to look into it, just make a call on it, just see why the other jurisdictions do it.
Because they get the money early, they invest the money, and they get the float, if you would. Whatever it is that's coming in is more, and if you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we end up getting millions, then even a week or 2 or 3 weeks interest can be significant.
Right.
And why not? Why should we not get it? Why should the county keep it? I actually brought it up years ago and couldn't convince other people that this is a fiscally responsible way to go. And so I decided I'd bring it up again because I think that we should be doing everything we can. And this is a simple thing that doesn't cost us anything.
Sure.
That will add to it will be to our benefit. And I thought that's what we should do.
Do we know, is it a 100% advance rate, a 80% advance rate? What do they advance?
Even if it's 75.
I don't know. Typically, the way, from my previous experience, the way it worked is whatever they had in their coffers or they had collected up to that point. So if people were paying early or if escrows were paying
Okay.
early, they would advance any money they had in their coffers early. I don't disagree that advances are out there. They've always been out there. My issue would be that we didn't have this conversation with the elected fiscal officer, but that would be the only comment that I would have. I mean, I think she should have weighed in on that, but.
And I would say is if it's money you're gonna use, why would you invest it? I mean, it'd just be neutral. So if it's money we're using
Well,
to
even
run the
if it's,
township,
even if it's
That's
parked
a
in
discussion
money
for
market,
another
though.
day. You really want me to start on that? Okay,
Well, I'm
I
just-
believe,
well,
Okay.
let me finish my question. I'm saying, if it's money we're using, money in,
Okay.
money out, then there would be no benefit. If you're gonna invest the money, then,
Well, yeah, technically, there would be a gain even if it was short-term money. If you're gonna, depending on what the dollar amount is, obviously, it would impact how much interest you would accrue over a 30-day period. But 30-day interest on $1 million or $4 million is significant. I think what you're looking at is if it's a pure cash flow in, cash flow out game,
Yeah, right.
versus long-term investment, there's a big difference in what you're going to pick up. But Mr. Barone, on our money market, which is where that money would, if you're going
Well,
to use it.
we haven't done anything with the money market and/or with the Morgan Stanley account.
No, that's what I'm asking. As far as if you were to park that money into a money market, which I'm assuming that's where you would park it.
Well,
Normally.
I haven't moved anything since you guys formed an investment advisory board.
Okay.
I have not.
But if we received an advance, it would go into the money market most likely.
It would go into the regular checking account
Okay.
unless I moved it into the money market,
Okay.
which is paying 2 basis points at this time.
That's fine. You answered the question. So the regular checking is paying 2 basis or the money market's
No,
paying 2
the
basis?
money market account is paying 2 basis points.
And the regular checking is paying?
It's not paying anything.
0.
Right.
Okay, so theoretically, if it went into the regular checking, there'd be no gain other than you'd have the cash sooner than you would before.
That's correct.
If you actually allocate that to the money market and you park it in there for 30 days, you would have a 2 basis point pickup.
That's correct.
Okay. And the administrative costs on the money market exceed or are lower than the 2 basis points?
I don't know at this point. I think they're lower.
Right, because
Yes.
we have a pickup at the end of the
That's
year. We
correct.
don't make a lot, but we make something.
That's
So
right.
assumingly the fees are better. Okay. So then the real question comes back to Mr. Paxton's question, which is if you move it to the money market and for a 30-day period, even if you're going to consume it 30 days later, there is a pickup. Okay.
Well, naturally. I mean, yeah, there's going to be some kind of an interest. It's not,
It's how my brain works. I apologize. So.
And that's fine, and I can't give you that figure off the top of my head. I was
No.
not prepared to do that, so.
Okay.
Well, I don't know what
And
we're
if
talking
you-
about, I don't know how much they've collected, I don't know what we're talking about. Are we talking about $100,000, talking about $200,000? I don't know that
2
you're talking a
million,
million. I doubt people have paid their property taxes up to $1 million right now, so.
and then if there's you park it for 30 days and you withdraw it because you need it, then is there a penalty to pay? Is it one of costing you?
Not for a money market.
No,
there's not.
it wouldn't cost you.
So I don't. I
In
can't-
principle, I agree with the concept. So I think I wouldn't have an issue supporting it. The only unanswered question in my mind then is, have we missed the deadline, or what is the deadline for participating in this tax collection cycle? Because if we miss this one, there is the June, but then we've deferred. We've missed 6 months, and whether it's $100 or $1,000 of pickup, we missed that opportunity.
so if we don't pass it, we don't have it at all. But if we do pass it and we have passed the deadline, at least we are ready for the rest of the year. And I think you'd have to do it annually.
You would have to
But
do
if we
it.
haven't passed it, then we have a bonus of 1 collection.
Right.
We used to do it semi-annually, so for each tax collection, they would pass a motion to ask for an advance for that tax collection.
Okay.
That's what we used to do typically.
Okay.
And they needed it, quite frankly. A lot of these jurisdictions need the money. Most of these jurisdictions don't have the kind of cushion that Beavercreek Township has right now. So I doubt that many of them are investing it. I think they need it to operate.
Okay. But there's no restriction that the funds have to be
No.
invested or not invested? so- okay.
Yeah, it's not,
All right.
there's not really, yeah, I don't see that there's really
Okay.
a big deal in doing it or not doing it at this point. I just don't know that you're gonna get the gain that you think you're gonna get.
Okay, so then it's just a matter of whether we have time to participate this time, or we have it in place so that we're participating in July, August.
That's right.
Okay, so to that degree, then I would support the motion. Any more questions from Mr. Paxson on this one? And it only because if we miss the deadline, we miss the deadline. It is what it is, and then you have 6 months to tell us why we shouldn't do it, if there's a reason.
Well, I don't know that I'm not gonna give you a reason that you shouldn't do it.
Right.
I don't think there's a pro or a con either direction. It's
Right.
just something that this
just
township
different.
has never done. That's
Right.
correct.
Okay.
I'm familiar with it, we just
Okay.
have never done it.
All right, so any other discussion? We'll call then.
Ms. Graff?
Yes,
I just want
Okay.
to make sure that there's not a loss on it. So if we invest it for 30 days, have to wind up using it for some reason.
There wouldn't
there's
be
no loss on
there
it.
wouldn't be a loss unless you were investing into a CD that you were closing
Then
early.
there's no-
Money market is just like a
Money
check.
market is just
Yeah.
interest-bearing checking account.
Okay.
Ms. Graff?
yes.
Mr. Paxson?
Yeah.
Mr. Kratz?
Yes. Very good. Human Resources, Ms. Gustafson.
Good afternoon. I do have one item for the agenda today, and it is the job description for the position of intern. Alex has already provided his feedback and approved what you were sent on Thursday.
And so, to expand a little bit further, would you consider this a generic internship description that could be used for any department? Mm-hmm. Okay.
That was the intent.
Okay, so.
We had originally written it so that it would be specific to Alex, but
Right.
he wanted it to open up so that anyone could use it if they wanted to bring an intern in.
Okay. And this is a non-paid for credit
Correct.
internship?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I would move to approve the job description for intern as proposed and recommended by the township administrator.
If you have a second, so we can open discussion.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Did you have any questions?
No.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a positive to have on hand. If we use it, we use it. If we don't, it's nothing lost.
I think it'd be beneficial to use it. So I think there's good resources out there, and you can help the community, and we can get not to be, I think it's important to recognize that when you bring in a non-paid intern, there still is an indirect cost to that, because for the orientation period, it does slow you down. And so you have to make sure you have the right intern so that you get out of that orientation curve as fast as you can and into a productive mode where they're actually adding value. So, call for a vote.
Ms. Graff?
Yes?
Mr. Paxson? Mr. Kratz?
Yes.
And then did you have any specific questions on the bi-weekly report that I submitted?
I had none. Mr. Paxson, Ms. Graff.
No?
Okay, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Zoning, Mr. Amrine.
Zero. Zero application.
Whole string of zeros, huh?
What have you been doing all
Here we
year?
are, starting another year all over again. By the way, just today I received the first single-family dwelling application of the year, so here we go. And we've made a little bit of progress on the River Reserve application. I finally got the drainage calculations from them, but it looks like that meeting will be taking place on the March zoning commission.
Skip the February.
And I don't remember what that date is. It's the first Thursday in March, maybe the 4th. I just don't know. But they didn't get their stuff in time for a February meeting, and the only thing I've heard from them is this morning's email with the drainage calculations on it.
Is there any indication on that one yet, if it's going to be the same builder as Bexley, or if he's going to partner with a different?
I haven't explicitly talked about that, and that information hasn't been shared with me.
Okay.
So
I'm just curious if they would indicate
we
that.
can make assumptions based on the new lot sizes that
Right.
that's the kind of developer who will want to move into those, into that kind of.
Will those be the smallest single-family lots in the township at that point? Because at 9,900 square feet, was that the smallest lot?
How big are the ones that
Not
the
all by
country
themselves.
club?
Not all by themselves. I mean, there are other lots of similar size.
Okay.
There aren't any smaller, but there are other lots of the same size.
Country Club of the North has some small
Right, and
lots.
I believe there are several at Hunter's Point that are quite small as well.
Okay.
And I think that has.
Any other questions or any other highlights that you want to point out for us?
Not really. If you have any questions about anything else, I am participating in an environmental studies class at UD as a mentor to a group of students who are doing work on wetland preservation. Last year, the same class, not the same group of students, but the same class did a consolidated wetland inventories for us, and this year they want to move into protection strategies. There is region-wide movement in wetland protection right now in that there's a wetlands interest group that's pooling membership from a variety of different organizations like land trusts and so forth. And given the fact that the National Wetland Inventory, the Ohio Wetland Inventory, and any local inventories that exist, none by itself is complete. The mapping skills and GIS skills of the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission are now being brought to bear to sort of layer all 3 or 4 of those different inventories, match them to the same scale, and then create a single unified document for the region that'll be very useful to a whole range of different municipalities and political jurisdictions as we consider ways to protect the wetland resources that we have.
Will this be one of the, or do we need an overlay district for this, or is the one we're considering for the, what's it? The aquifer sufficient for the wellhead protection?
Oh, for the wellhead protection, certainly there's overlap between wellhead protection and wetland considerations. I'm not yet able to say the degree to which there will be a separate wetland protection overlay proposal or not. Okay. The overlays I'm sure are coming this year are wellhead and the highway district. The wetland, what we do by way of protecting wetlands depends on a couple of factors that we don't know yet, such as I said, the degree to which there's overlap, and also overlap between wetlands and floodplain. Because if we're also dealing with floodplains, then there's a huge impact from FEMA on what we can and cannot do by way of protecting floodplains. So right now, I'm assuming there will simply be an amendment to our floodplain and river protection language in our zoning resolution.
Who's teaching the wetlands class?
Who's teaching it? Oh, I was afraid you'd ask me that. I I didn't bring that information with me.
That's okay. I'm just-
I was drawn into it by Bob Jurek of
Greenway.
BW Greenways, who is also heading up the wetlands interest group. And so we're working with other mentors of that class, include 2 landscape architects, one other public official, and Bob himself. So.
I was just curious.
Any other awareness items that you need to bring to us as far as other than the, and any update or awareness item we need as far as Greene County Regional Planning and the decisions that are being put to that
They're meeting right
executive?
now. Their
Okay.
executive committee is meeting right now at 1:30 today, and the full committee will meet next Tuesday at 7:30 in the evening, and presumably, well, if statements from the Commissioner Kugler are accurate, the committee is being encouraged to actually make a decision now as to whether or not to dissolve themselves in favor of a county planning department or not. 2 of you were at the, no, you were all at
All
the Township Association meeting the other night, last week, and it was an interesting discussion, and my personal view is that the situation is far from resolved at this point. I wouldn't, based on the tenor in the room, I wouldn't say we're close to making a final decision on that yet, but that's not up to me. It's up to the actual planning commission to make that decision. So next Tuesday night could be fairly important if the commission decides to dissolve itself.
Okay. Mr. Paxton, as far as from your involvement there, are there pros? What are the pros? What are the cons as far as continuing or dissolving, or I shouldn't say dissolving, I should say consolidating it under the county planning and economic development? What are the pros and what are the cons?
Well, the only pros I can think of is the amount of time it takes, the amount of time it has taken to replace the position, or do a search and replace the position. That's a con. The pro is, I think, input from the various townships and having a say in it. I think there's a trust issue. I think there's a huge trust issue, in my opinion. I think that's what's really holding the whole thing up. If there was, and I'm not sure, well, I got my opinion on where the trust issue lies. But it's a shame that there's that kind of a barrier there. The county probably could do just as well as a job, but I just think there's a trust issue with various townships not having a say in anything, you know.
At the risk of being politically incorrect here, I think that what I saw in the room last week was a dynamic in which the commissioners have created a problem by refusing to fill positions in the department, and then by cutting the budget in half last year. And now they're holding up that problem for us all to see as a reason for taking this action that they're advocating. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy here, and the problem wouldn't exist if they had not made the decision on some level not to continue to fulfill their obligations. And I say obligation guardedly here, that they're required by the Ohio Revised Code to provide these services. The code doesn't tell them how. And so they can do it with private consultants. They can do it as a county planning department. What exists now is a regional planning commission that is independent. And therein lies the other elephant in the room, as you mentioned. Dan, is that regardless of the current trust issues with the current county commissioners, I think it's always risky to create a situation in which final decisions on local issues, like approval of a subdivision, rest with elected officials who are not representing that jurisdiction where the construction is proposed. I'd rather see those decisions remain with local officialdom and with other citizen planners from the rest of the county, from other townships in the county. That's my point of view on it, since we're talking about it for what it's worth. I recognize other points of view are just as valid, but those are my 2 cents.
Should we as a board come up with a recommendation of how we want the
It sounded as though at least we should, as a board, come up with how we would like, if the vote goes to the full committee, which I assume it's not an executive committee decision, it's a full committee decision, correct?
It's a full committee decision.
Okay. And just for Mr. Paxton's sake, if he's going to be the one voting for that, we at least cast it as a board.
I will
So,
find out as quickly.
I'll be honest with you, as a layperson sitting in that meeting, the spin sounded as though it sounded positive.
Oh, yeah.
It really did, and so I don't have the background, obviously, that Mr. Paxton or Ms. Graff would have with that organization, but the spin, it sounded logical, that consolidation.
I don't doubt the skill of Mr. Williams or Mr. Huddleston in managing this process. All I meant to say was that I think that the issue was manufactured in the first place.
Yeah.
Sure.
That
The key
it needn't ever have come to this. And so,
Sure.
Right. Well, part of it is because the cities dropped out, so the
Right.
income, which was significant from the city members who do not have to belong because they can provide their own services, reduced the resources they had. But the county chose also to reduce its resources, and when they keep saying they can't do this and they can't do that, that I don't believe is a completely accurate statement, because if they can give any money to the organization, they can give more money, so to provide whatever needs to be done.
Right.
And they're playing a power struggle here. I think if the county would agree to have, instead of an advisory board, a recommendation board as we have now, made up of the townships, the members of regional planning, those who pay the dues, most of the jurisdictions would probably, at least I think, pull back on the objections. At this point, the question is, will there be any significant input by the affected jurisdictions under the county plan as they just gave it to their little advisory board? And I liken it to the county dispatch. We ran into the exact same problem and the same distrust, which is why we do not have a county dispatch. So I don't know what we could, how we would frame a motion. I feel that I would like to see, because I was involved years ago on the Greene County Regional Planning, and Mr. Paxton has been for the past, 7 years with it. I really would like to have whatever configuration they came up with, have the paying jurisdiction representatives have a recommendation ability on the decisions that affect the townships. That doesn't mean they have to do it on whatever else the county's doing. I think what the county is doing to us is saying, if you want to keep it the way it is, you figure out how you're going to pay and come up with the money to make sure that that organization can be a viable organization.
And the one draft of a fee proposal that we saw was frankly a dangerous model for townships. It was a model that structured fees such that any developer proposing to do anything on any property adjacent to any municipality is going to be encouraged to annex because of the way the fee structure was proposed. Now, the board chose not to act on that fee structure when it was proposed, but it was out there. And so I have a little bit of trepidation about what kind of fee structure will be proposed under the new model too, and whether the
But prior to voting to consolidate or to remain independent as a group organization, all of those factors should be laid on the table. So there should be a fee structure, there should be an operating agreement between how it's going to function, how the quote advisory or recommending board would be established, and the makeup of that board, so that it's not developers only.
And if I make any statement at next week's meeting, it'll be just to that point, that this is for the commission to make a final decision next Tuesday is premature. For those.
Well, you have to have a plan of how you're going to provide the service.
Exactly.
The spin I heard was that the county has money to fund the organization as it goes forward, with no change. It has more money if it has control of that planning commission, essentially, if it's folded into the county, and that the resources of economic development and their planning resources would be able to complement or even provide greater service for the same cost. So there's always a caveat, and all those caveats have to be laid out before a board simply says, we don't have enough people wanting to participate, only 9 people show up at the meetings, therefore let's fold this so we can all do something else once every.
That frankly was the most compelling argument in favor of the change, and that is that the commission has had trouble getting
Participation.
at their full commission meeting. The executive committee's been pretty faithful, but the full commission has sometimes had to table or delay action because of the lack of.
It was interesting. I mean, what I observed was the comments from elected officials appeared to be against the change, but the individual from the executive committee honestly sounded whipped. He sounded tired and exhausted.
Tired. They really are. And they've been fighting this battle for 3 years.
So, and without full strength of a full participation, it's hard to say if you care, you'd be here. So, okay.
And you know, the other thing there,
So what direction should we go?
if they kept the executive committee as an advisory committee, they would just take their opinion under advisement. They wouldn't have any say-so. And the townships would still have to pay a fee for the work that's done, like they are doing now. And I think that was another concern is the fee structure and the increase in fees and the unknown, basically is what Tom was saying. There's no fee schedule, you know, they could crank a percentage increase on a fee from year to year and make it difficult for townships to participate.
My opinion is it'll fragment further, that the townships that can will team up with the cities that have their own planning department. They'll take the path of lowest cost to provide the same service. And so it'll fragment further, which then will get the county out of the regional planning business, which may or may not be their end goal, but that's.
Is that a choice?
They can't get out of it entirely, according to.
No, but they can make it cost prohibitive for you to participate.
I know, but they must, okay, we cannot provide our own subdivision regulations. I believe we have to go through the county. I don't think the Ohio Revised Code says we can have it done by a municipality. Somehow I think we are tied to the county for building regulations and for subdivision regulations. For them to give us some sort of recommendation, however it is, and they do all the okays on the subdivision, we have no say whatsoever. So they have us tied up. The question is, what kind of resources would they provide, under the current setup, they are not going to provide any additional resources, which would leave us, as township, if you've seen some of the old reports that we've had, I do not believe that two people running the entire operation can provide the reports of the same quality that we've had in the past. And they came up with our our comprehensive plan. They worked very closely with us on that. And I don't think they have the amount of resources now that they can do that because of the reduction of contribution from the county, even though this year they went up a little bit. So I don't know. That's why I was at Mr. Paxton. Do you have a feel of how you would vote when it comes up next week, one way or the other, or what input that you're going to give them on our behalf?
Well, I'm inclined to kind of see it through. I mean, because I get to feel like the board's tired, but the township reps
To
want
maintain the current or to consolidate under the county?
to not sever that tie, because I think once you lose your voice, forget it, you never get it back. That's my thought on it. So, however, if the county doesn't want that umbilical, so to speak, I would think that would be a bad thing if none of the townships had any say in it.
I think my hope for next Tuesday is simply that the commission would ask the county for a detailed proposal.
That's
All the details that you.
I would suggest that they defer the vote until there's a plan. It's kind of like asking for local funding or asking for support of the highway project until you have a plan for the funding. It's no different in my mind. How are you gonna structure? How are you gonna maintain the voice? You're buying a seat at the table you may not have a voice at. Why'd you
Right,
pay?
and then the funding could be like a 1 year or 5 year thing, and
Right.
then once it's done, and they can,
That'd be my recommendation, is that we
Okay.
ask them to defer, but
yeah,
Okay, I would concur with that recommendation, and that's
Alright.
what you bring forth.
get a schedule and,
You want a detailed plan
a detailed
from the
plan.
county before we as a township
Before
are
we
willing to
dissolve
dissolve.
ourselves
Yeah.
as a planning commission.
I think that's the opinion okay, that's unanimous opinion. Consensus. Okay.
anything else, Mr. Hamlin? Okay, thank you. Information technology, Mr. Terry?
Afternoon, Board. So we'll just jump right into the RFP and proposal for the information technology support for the city of Beavercreek. I did attach the RFP to the packet that went out. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it and if you had any thoughts one way or another on it. But
I'll ask a question, and maybe this will stimulate just some conversation. I don't know how the township can respond to this RFP as a vendor. And if I look at some of this and some of the requests that they have as far as 24/7 support,
that's some of the problems I'm having writing the proposal.
and maybe what I would recommend is that, and I'll just put this out there, that we respectfully decline the RFP, but what we would prefer to do is we'd prefer to sit down with the city after they get all of their responses back and look at is there a way to define a strategy that we can work together to provide pieces or a major components of what they need, in a way that doesn't put us at a vendor relationship, it puts us at a partner relationship. So if you're gonna have a shared service agreement, you're generally partners in that. And there's a difference between that and having a vendor relationship, at least in my opinion. So I don't know how else you technically quote this.
Yeah, there's several areas I was having difficulty with, and that is the commitment of the time. If we have projects going on here and they have a system go down that they have an hour response time, it's kind of,
Right.
do I hire out a third party to do it, or?
Right, and then liability that goes along with that. If you have to pull a third party in, I would be cautious as far as committing to some of these deliverables that they've put in this RFP.
They put everything in the chicken, it's a shotgun approach. Everything in the kitchen sink and see what comes back. And I agree that I don't think we are in a position to
I have no
provide
doubt
this
that
kind
we
of-
can provide a cost savings with us and the city
That's a
both.
start. I mean,
Well, you
that's
have-
where that's where you start at. I mean, that's,
We've tried to open communication with them on this topic for over a year. Mr. Zaharia and myself both have talked with the city manager and Mr. Katsura there, and trying to get a sit down, and it seems like there was always a project or something that was more pressing.
Right. But I mean, if it's a true partnering and come up with a shared service agreement, they know what their costs were when they handled it themselves internally. They know what their costs were last year and for the last period of the contract they've been under. They'll have the current bids. Maybe they get 1, maybe they get 5, I don't know. And then if we can sit down collectively and review that information, like I said, there's components here, that you may be able to pick off, that would fold in and make 1 + 1 = 3. Right now, this is, for us to quote this, I think would be, I think we'd be overestimating our ability to service it. And then like you said, prioritization, which comes first, police or fire?
Yes.
I'd like to answer that one.
I think we know the answer, but
Yeah.
contractually, you don't have an internal service agreement with our own departments.
Yeah, it's not being a private vendor.
You know what I'm saying? So there's some caution I would recommend.
Like I said, I've been working on a proposal. I would,
But maybe they would entertain that. Maybe they would entertain sitting down and reviewing the proposals. It also appears that in some ways there, from an IT standpoint, there's not a synergy between where we're at and where they are today, as far as server-based or cloud-based.
yeah,
So-
I have no doubt that we could provide some shared services and save some money on both sides, but it's, by putting it out for RFP, they kind of put our feet to the fire, being a government entity as well as
Right.
them. But
Okay.
there are some of the remote management software we currently do not have, and one price that we would have to come up with. We can certainly add it back into the contract, but the lab tech software provides web-based monitoring from anywhere, and there is a cost to that. It's pretty robust software with all it does. Provides patch management, remote patch management, change management. We're also going to have the ability here in a couple months to put our mobile, the Mass 360 that we have to monitor the mobile devices is going to be part of that console. But
Sure. And that's where there may be some things that as a byproduct of that agreement, we both benefit from. But again, I just don't know how that'd be my recommendation, is that we decline it, but then we include with that a request to meet with them immediately following when they get all of their bids back, and review them and look for a way to put together something that might make more sense.
okay, I'd like to
So you have a
touch
different
base.
opinion.
no.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I just wonder sometimes if it would be beneficial to try to find some neutral parties, where there's not some neutral parties that come in and look at the thing and see where you could work together without any kind of tension there.
Right.
Voluntary.
The political tension.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see this as political tension in this case. I think they just put out an RFP that
Right.
we cannot possibly provide.
I think you
And
just.
so we just say we can't do it and thank them for,
Right.
whatever. And if we can work together in other ways, fine. But I don't see its tension. I think they're asking for much more than we
Right.
have the ability to do, so.
Right, I think Mr. Paxton's saying in order to get to a shared service agreement, we need to somehow take the politics off the table and hopefully,
We're adults, we should be able to do that.
You
I
would
agree,
think-
yeah, I
you would
don't know if a
think.
third party will make a difference, but,
but it would be interesting to see if Green Tree, for example, whatever they come back with, and they're one of several that are out there, it'd be interesting to get a second opinion as well. But, you know, if you could do the same type of not organizational, but infrastructure audit that you just did, if you could do that at the city and then
They did run one on the city.
and then ask them to do an overlay and a mesh, and see what can, and so it'd be interesting. So,
We do have a meeting with them to go over our assessment on the 27th.
good.
Mr.
it'll be
Zahari.
interesting to see if they responded to the city RFP.
Yes, they're on the.
They're on the list, eh?
Okay.
Uh,
Anything else in your bi-weekly?
Well, just one more note on that. I'd kind of like to touch base with Mr. Zahari and see if that, I guess you're recommending a letter go out to them versus the submitting a proposal, or?
I don't know how you can respond to this without putting so many X's on it that it would be pushed back anyway. So that, I think, yeah, just a respectful declining of the RFP, but extending an offer to meet and review their bids with them, and review the Green Tree information that we have, their Green Tree information, and look for a path forward of a shared service agreement that might make sense to cover part or all of this need. So, it's aggressive, but it's also one of the strategic goals that we gave the administrator. So it's at the top of his list.
Shared agreements, it didn't say it had to be this one.
Didn't say it had to be IT, but this is the one, this is
On the table.
the low-hanging fruit at the moment. So,
Okay. I think I don't have any questions.
only other question I had, and it ties back with HR as well, as far as Mr. Erickson is contracted through, we did 6 weeks, if I'm correct? So
Yeah, it's till the end of February, I believe.
okay, and what we had asked for, and I didn't see it today, but and I think there was something, there was a note in your bi-weekly, as far as when we'll have that job description and that survey completed to February 2nd, okay.
Okay, yeah, that's,
Okay.
I didn't get.
Just so we can hit it head on versus at the second meeting in February when we're in a, right.
Yeah, I was a little bit tied up with this RFP and the,
Okay. Anything else for Mr. Terry, Mr. Paxton, Ms. Gray?
Nope.
Thank you.
okay, thank you, Board.
Roads.
Good afternoon, Board.
Hello? Got a lot of salt left here, don't you?
I just have a couple items for you today. The first one is the 2014 Township Highway System mileage certification. Actually, we didn't add any new sections of road in 14. We missed it by 5 days, but we were waiting on a letter back from the developer with some stuff that he has to complete. But we are still at 40.743 miles. However,
Is that lane miles?
yes.
Okay.
Actually, that's center line miles. My mistake.
Okay, I was gonna say, I thought we were
What kind of miles other than?
lane miles.
Okay.
Center line. So
Center line, line.
Center line, I'm
miles would
sorry.
be both, so
Right,
we
center
can
line.
double it. But we have already in 15 added .470 by accepting Spring Meadow section 3 and 4. I anticipate, I don't know the mileage on it yet, but we will probably before the end of the year do Liberty Hill 2, section 2, and Claiborne Green, and maybe Bexley Hills 3A. I'll look for those to come on before the end of 15.
So we might end up with an additional mile at the end of 2015?
Over a mile.
Okay.
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 You have the motion?
I make a motion to approve the 2014 Township Highway System mileage certification as presented.
Second.
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Ms. Graff,
Yes?
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
And the second thing I have on the agenda is a purchase request to Southeastern Equipment.
Oh, man, if I go back. As part of the discussion, Mr. Barone, would you just put in that Mr. Parks indicated that it's 40.73 miles, and that's the recommended that we approve. Thank you.
The second thing I have on the agenda is a purchase request to Southeastern Equipment for a replacement stabilizer cylinder for the backhoe. The current one, where the attachment ring for the pad connects, we've noticed a crack, and we don't know if it's full depth. It appears to be in some places. We've looked at welding it, but there's no way to get inside and weld the inside. So we're going to go back with the original equipment just for safety reasons, because the last thing we want is for the stabilizers to be out and I'm working the backhoe and the one side collapse. So
It would not be good.
that would
Is it
not
the
be good.
housing that's cracked, you said? The housing was cracked or the cylinder?
There's a D-ring on the end of the cylinder.
Okay.
That's cracked where it connects right there.
Oh, okay. All right, make a motion to approve the purchase request 00338 to Southeastern Equipment for replacement stabilizer for the backhoe in the amount of $2,800, and to authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second.
Any discussion? If you can call, please.
Mr. Paxton,
Yeah.
Ms. Graff,
Yes?
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
And the last thing, my bi-weekly report, going to answer any questions. The one highlight is, just be aware probably at the next meeting, we'll be bringing a full-time service worker back to you for approval. I think interviews are scheduled for Friday of this week. The board interviews, and from there, they'll bring 2 or 3 forward to me for another little interview and then a decision. So,
You said the board interviews them?
yes.
What is that? Okay, your panel, okay.
I want to thank you for the little chart you have here with the salt so far. I like that.
Big difference between a year, but
Well, so far.
Season's
2014 was the entire
Season's not over.
2014.
now, the season's not over, but
we're in
And
better
if we're
shape.
only in 1 month, now, do the 15 include the 14-15 season? Or
Yes.
is we talking, okay.
and
So
14 includes the 13-14 season from the beginning.
Okay, so it's full through.
Right.
Okay.
Through
And so
the-
this includes what we had in November.
Right, through the 15th of January of last year. So it's a full season.
Okay.
Any other questions, Mr. Parks? Any other, thank you. Chief? Up to bat.
Good afternoon, Board. The first item on the agenda for you today is the preview of the incident information we discussed last meeting. This is part of what will be included in our annual report for 2014. From the daily incident count, that actually looks a lot like last year. One or two highs and lows, but generally our average daily incident load is about 15 calls per day, but you can see there's a pretty decent amount of variability there. And then for the calls for service type, which is the one that we look at actually a little bit more, you'll notice that just about all of our incident types are trending up, except for hazards and fire. Fires are on a decline, which is a good thing from our Prevention Bureau standpoint, and that includes all fire types, not just structure fires. The two big changes you'll notice is an increase in EMS calls and a pretty significant decrease in good intent calls. And a big part of that, although I can't quantify exactly how much, we just don't have sufficient granularity in the data, but that is a recategorization. So for example, we used to classify lift assist, where somebody had fallen, we'd go help them back up into a chair, into a bed, something like that. That used to be either a good intent call or maybe a service call, but generally good intent. Those are now categorized as EMS calls after some of the frequent users that we ran into last year in the evaluation process we did as far as how we were reporting and documenting that. So that's a big part of it. It's not that there was a dramatic shift in the call for service type, there was a dramatic shift in how we were categorizing it and tracking it for our purposes. So do you have any questions on that? Or like I said, this is a preview. We'll be doing a little bit more analysis as we go into our annual report, but that's the
I don't have any questions on this, but I have a comment that's not fire department, but it's dispatch. And I can't remember who told me. They made a call. They called dispatch. Whoever it is, they wasn't breathing very well. And so the dispatcher said, I guess I kept asking questions, and I knew that's part of our PDA, whatever it is that they're doing. And then she said, the dispatcher said, call me back if he's not breathing, rather than staying on the phone until someone came. And I would...
Can you give me a date and a time so we could look into it? Any chance?
I can't even remember exactly who told me. It was just so... The person was really upset that they said, you know, here I was in a situation where, I guess it was a spouse, was not breathing very well, called for help, wanted the reassurance and to tell what, if anything had changed, and was told, okay, I'm sending someone, hang up, and if something else bad happens, call back. They did not like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, when you get those anecdotal stories, if you could pass on the information to me, that would help. Because in our quality control part of ProQA, ProQA, let's start with that. That system is designed to expedite calls for critical care calls.
Right.
So if there's a person who's having a lot of difficulty, the call should get dispatched relatively quickly. And then the other advantage of the system is the follow-up, the after call, or the instructions for after call care are part of that. And they should be codified, they should be read, and everything else. So one of the things I'd like to know is, did all of that happen and it truly was time for the end of the call? There's a customer service aspect, which is, even if you're done with all of that, if the person needs or wants to stay on the line for assurance or anything else, I don't know how the PD handles that as policy. That's something that I can find out from them.
Well, evidently, when the person complained, you know what I mean, you want me to get off the phone, call back, you stay on the phone, they did.
Okay, well, then that's good, and that's usually
And I explained why the
expect.
questions came back so that they could triage it and understand what it is they have to send. That wasn't the problem. It was the problem that the dispatcher's gonna have them hang up and call back if the person's dead.
Yeah, that would be bad. And so the other thing that I was
They
gonna
were happy
mention
with
is-
our service.
Okay, well, that's.
And when our people came, not a problem. They were excellent. It was just the call part.
All right, I'm glad to hear that. So the other part of it is we are actively doing the quality control now. So we actually go back, and it's primarily Chief Dorson and Lieutenant Hawker at this point. They listen to a certain number of calls, actual audio of the call. They compare what's being tracked in ProQA and make sure it's all appropriate. So the problem is, it's a small sample of the total call volume, so they may or may not hear an incident like that. So if we know about it, then we can actually go back and double check and make sure it's handled appropriately. And if not, make recommendations for training and things like that to accomplish it.
I have a quick question on your chart. As far as, do you have the ability in your system to drill down into this data and tell us on the EMS calls, for example, or any category in your list, but EMS specifically, resident versus non-resident, billed versus collected?
The resident versus non-resident, we can put down, the short answer is yes. There's a much longer answer that goes into the degree of certainty we have based off of the address and the information we get. There is not a specific question right now that is tracked yes or no. It's derived from other data that we collect.
Okay.
The billed versus collected, we can, but it's in a separate system, and that data we don't currently actively bring in and directly compare. So,
I'm not asking you to add another layer. I know that you're going through the exercise of looking at modifying that policy and how you do, and how you bill and how you collect and what your policies would be. I'm just, that degree of information might lead you to say the impact of making this change could be this amount or negligible, so.
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, we have our first meeting to discuss that tomorrow. It's scheduled. And one of the things we are going to ask is if there's any way they can help. As you can imagine, the EMS billing company collects a lot of that information. The ease with which we could compare it to our data, so we could do that kind of
Right,
correlation.
it's not the same system.
Yeah, we can see if they could help us with that.
This is a point of curiosity from a standpoint of, is the scale, how heavily is it tipped in the favor of the resident versus non-resident? And I would assume that as we become more of a pass-through community,
Yes.
And that we have more retail and lifestyle centers,
More
that the non-resident is, the non-resident component of that EMS call may be growing.
Yes, sir. And we may be able to pull that from the data they're collecting as is and just not cross-reference it to ours. So that is one, I'll ask the question tomorrow and see what we can find out.
It may be helpful in your analysis is all.
Yes, sir.
In the EMS response, can you break that out as to ALS, BLS type calls?
We definitely can from the, again, one of those long and short answers. Yes, we can. We can do it from several different angles, and what we haven't decided is what the official's going to be. So we can do it based off of what ProQA assigns it as, and consequently what it's dispatched as. We can do it from what it's billed as, what the billing company would determine it to be. And we can do it from what our crews assign it. So what we haven't decided is if any one of those is the way we should specifically look at it. What we are trying to do is come up with a report where we can compare the three, because what we'd like to do is have it consistent. So dispatch calling it an ALS, our crews treating it as an ALS, and the EMS billing company billing it out as an ALS. That should all be fairly consistent.
Yeah.
And where it's not, we need to work on bringing it in line. But what we don't have, again, is that comprehensive report that can show us all three snapshots at the same time. So it's a lot.
Doesn't the billing come off of, doesn't billing come directly off the apparatus country?
It comes off the data, but not necessarily off what our crews think it is. It's based off what the EMS billing folks can generate it for based off of the documentation that's provided. So our crews may think it's an ALS call, but the billing company may say based off of the HHS rules, we can only bill it as an EMT or as a basic call, for example. Or maybe our crews think it's critical care, but they say we can only bill it as an ALS. So, and that's a discrepancy between the billing clerk expertise dealing with the HHS bureaucracy and the billing side of it versus what the crews think that they performed based off of either the crew that was on or the equipment that they used or the things that they performed. So, and some of the nuances are discrete enough that the EMS billing company is probably more accurate from that side of it. Like if you ask our crews, was that ALS, BLS, or critical care, their answer is probably less important for what revenue is going to come into the EMS billing clerk. But again, the closer we can get those two, the closer our crews, when they do designate what they think it is, the more likely it will match up with what the EMS billing clerk has. So, but yeah, it does all come from the basic
Otherwise, you're
information.
over-responding potentially. So,
Well, I would think you start an IV. I mean, there's some things that once you start, it's pretty basic.
But it's not just the starting IV, it's the need for the IV and other, and if I remember correctly, and actually I'm pretty sure I don't, but so use this as anecdotal as opposed to specific. It's not just an IV, it's like an IV plus 2 critical care drugs equals a critical care call. An IV in and of itself, like a lock, for example, would not necessarily be an ALS call, but a lock plus another advanced procedure like a cardiac monitor or O2 treatment may be an ALS call. So it's more a la carte than specifically one treatment makes it X and another makes it Y.
there's a point system essentially applied, and it adds up to
Something
either
like
is
that's
or it is
probably a good
not.
way to think of it, yes.
Okay. It's scored differently.
Yeah, but there's got to be some like minimum things, and then addition to that adds up to it.
Right. Okay.
It's more complex than I can keep track of, quite frankly.
Okay.
And probably only likely to get more complex as we move forward. So.
Okay.
I'll get that other information for you. The next item we had for you today is an approval of a new departmental rule. This is the one that we discussed previously for fire department lateral entry hiring. There was a draft copy in your packet, and I didn't know if you had a chance to review it, if you had any opinions. But this would be for hiring, and now that we no longer have an internal pool to pull from, what we'd like to do is essentially go back and try and reclaim some of the talent that has left us when opportunities do arise. So.
That we paid to train. Okay. If we can get a motion, then we can, in a second, we can open discussion.
Yes, it move to approve Fire Department Standard Operating Guideline 5130.001 for Fire Department lateral entry hiring version 1. Dated January 20th, 2015.
Second.
In discussion.
Well, I know we need it, and it's a good thing to have, and I didn't have any questions other than they're saying that it has to meet whatever we presently do. My question would be, is there going to be a follow-on for if we need people and we don't get lateral transfer individuals applying, what are we going to do for new people entirely?
I don't know that we would specifically have a separate policy for that, other than the general township policy for how we advertise and hire positions,
Okay.
but that's, I'll defer to HR.
No, we don't. Okay, we have sufficient in place. This is just to allow for the lateral transfer. Okay.
Yes,
Not
that
a
was my
problem.
understanding. And I didn't mention this just now, but HR and the township administrator proper, Mr. Zaharieff, both did review and were fine with the content, so.
In section 3.2, as far as minimum qualifications, we're holding essentially a lateral entry to the same or comparable requirements as what we would hire. We would go out for a new hire.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, it's one step higher in the fact that we're requiring that they be currently employed as a
firefighter.
Exactly. So we're guaranteeing that, number one, they're pension eligible because they're already in the pension system, and we're guaranteeing that they have full-time work experience. So it's actually just a step above what we have just recently done. Although the certifications are the same, the additional that comes along with it has been improved a little bit.
Okay.
What's the medical certification? Remind me of that.
3.2 is
Yeah, medical cert is under the qualifications. There's
EMT,
There
paramedic.
was an either/or that either a current CPAT or a fitness for duty result from an NFPA 1582 compliant physical within a year.
yeah, F is the medical certification. What's that?
no, it's made up of, it's comprised of either 1 or 2.
Oh, it is.
F1 or
I'm
F2.
sorry, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the indenting didn't carry over, so.
I have a couple.
And then supplemented with, they have to be currently employed as a firefighter.
Right, okay. I think we've got to be careful with that, personally. I think it ought to be the CPAT, because the Fit for Duty NFPA 1512, I'm not sure what that comprises of. But as I mentioned before, I think sometimes we want to, well, not sometimes, I think we want to make sure we get somebody that's fit to do the job. And without saying that 1582, I don't know what that entails basically, but I do know the CPAT. If you can pass the CPAT, you're fit to do the job, physically, at least come in the door. So my concern is,
What's the gap between the CPAT and the Fit for Duty?
The key difference there, the CPAT is a standardized test that's been nationally recognized, nationally defended. It gets all the different issues as far as disparate hiring things. The difference between that and an NFPA 1582 compliant physical is with the compliant physical, you actually have the employee who's being evaluated by a physician or a physician equivalent across all of the, I think there's 13 different key performance factors for the job. And they typically also include cardiac evaluation, whether monitor or other respiratory evaluation and things like that. So you're actually being seen by a physician who's evaluating based off of basically the job description or the job duties, as opposed to 1582, which is more analytical. So if you want to think of it in terms of one's prescriptive as far as the CPAT, they have to do X number of skills in a certain amount of time. The other is performance-based, or excuse me, prescriptive. The doc evaluates against the specific conditions in 1582, as opposed to performance-based, where the person's actually doing the functions in the job. So that's why they're both in there. And to give you an example, if we were to hire somebody from, our most recent part-timer that left for full-time employment went to Springfield. After 1 year in Springfield, if he had a 1582 physical, he would be evaluated by a physician. The physician would say he's fit for duty based off the 13 parts job factors that are in 1582, and would have actually been seen by a medical professional to evaluate that. He may or may not have an active CPAT at that point, because typically CPAT is entry level. So for departments that don't offer 1582, CPAT gives us another way to accomplish it. But I think the 1582 physical is probably the more aggressive or more specific way to make sure that the person is able to do the job.
And the CPAT we require on new hires, but we require it on when we hire them, but it's not an annual recertification.
Correct. That is correct.
So theoretically, the fit for duty would be more relevant and recent, at least the way you've got this worded.
Correct. Most
would be within
departments
1 year.
most departments that have a 1582 program, it is an annual event, so they're being evaluated annually, and that's what we would look for also. If it's not within 1 year, we would agree that the concerns Mr. Paxson brought up are the ones that we would have also, is when's the last time a physician actually did see them and evaluate them for their employment. So at that point, the CPAT is a way for them to go back and have an alternative to that.
So is there a logical reason why you wouldn't shorten that 1 year to 6 months?
No, it could be as short as we want.
Or 90 days.
It's just typically offered on a 1 year basis, and the CPAT's a 1 year certification, so it just kind of gelled.
So,
But yeah, we could make it as short a time.
if you made it 90 days, I mean, is there a scheduling issue where someone could not accomplish that? Or are they picking the doctor, or is it set by the state board?
Those are usually employer defined programs, not employee, so you wouldn't typically go to your personal physician and get a 1582 physical. It's part of an occupational health.
Okay.
So
Do
if
we
the
do
employer
that on a regular basis for our employees?
No, not currently. But that's one of the things.
With the lateral, I mean, they're already in the pension system, so our concern is maybe what has transpired between their hiring and our prospective hiring.
There's a fine line there, too.
No, there's not a fine line. I'd just like to expand a little bit. Go ahead, if you had something to say.
Well, I mean, for example, some departments I work with, they do have a hired specific occupational physician that on a yearly basis in November, December, they go through the 1582 physicals.
For all
then-
firefighters, for the entire department?
For all firefighters, yes. And then they are either deemed fit for duty, 90-day, they call it like 90-day unfit, so they have 90 days to resolve whatever the issue is, or unfit for duty for some other reason. But there's a lot of departments out there that have that. It's on an annual basis. But you have to be very careful that it's not necessarily done punitively.
All right, so, Con.
All yours.
Okay, here's my point on this whole thing right here. CPAT, they gotta be fit. They gotta be fit to get in the door. That is a stringent test, all right? It's based off the first 10 minutes of a working fire, all the things that unfold. It's a physical demanding job, so that's a stringent test. To my knowledge, there is no program in place in any departments around here, or wherever this person might be coming from, I don't know, just to keep anybody in shape once they get hired in the door. There's no program to keep them in shape. A physical is not the same as the physical agility or the CPAT. They're not even anywhere close. So, you could get somebody in here that could pass that NFPA 1582 test. You know, they got blood pressure, they walk, whatever. I don't know, I have to see what the test is, but it's not a physically demanding test like the CPAT is.
It's not a test, it's an evaluation.
It's an evaluation.
Medical
Okay, so
evaluation.
it's a medical evaluation. So you're not really doing anything. You might bend over, you know, pick things up, but it's
There's a
not
s-
it's stringent.
There's a stress test involved in some other, comprehensive.
Okay. The CPAT is a known test. They're coming in fit, all right? They can squeak in under the radar under this NFPA 1582, number one. Number two, the other thing I didn't like here is that they will solicit full-time firefighters from other departments to be hired in a lateral transfer. So that means we could go out after some people that,
Where are you at? What section? Sorry.
this is section 2, no, I'm sorry, section 3.1 under general, under policy. 3.0,
Okay.
all right, okay, the second sentence.
3.11.
First sentence.
Right.
When hiring firefighters to fill vacant positions in the authorized staffing resolution, BFD will solicit full-time. So we can go out after anybody they want to and bring them in here and get them in there underneath this medical certification thing. All right, somebody that's been out there for 15 years working for another department may not be in any kind of shape to come in here under the CPAT test, but they might be able to get in there underneath that NFPA 1582. That concerns me.
What's the period that a CPAT is
It's a 1 year.
1 year certification?
We
Okay.
got to keep it up.
So, okay.
It concerns me because of the injuries. I mean, the injuries and the fact that we are,
Well, safety, number one, I think, is the number one concern, to make sure that they are capable of doing the job. And then number two is, what are you exposing yourself to from are they truly fit for the position? So maybe what I can offer or suggest is that we defer this maybe to the next meeting, and and during that, because let me ask this, you're not at this time looking to lateral entry any firefighter, so this is a what if,
will
when.
be August,
Okay.
sometime around there.
So this is an if-then for the future.
Yes, sir.
We just need to make sure we do it right from the start. So maybe we take this under advisement at this meeting, but then maybe by the next meeting or so, you come back to us. And it would be interesting just to see an overlay of what are those, what is evaluated in a 1582. And then at the same time, what are the functions that are tested in the CPAT? Because what you're looking for is there an overlap and is there a gap?
There is an overlap, and there's some that's covered
Right.
on either side, but
But if there's a
It's not pure.
specific function that you have to be able to do in the CPAT, I think what Mr. Paxton is looking for, and what I would be interested in seeing just is, if you can pass the CPAT, is there, number one, does the medical evaluation pick up things the CPAT does not? I'm presuming.
I would argue that it would.
I'm presuming it does. So, I'm presuming it does.
Well-
Hidden, it's a latent, it's a latent issue. It's not obvious when you may be able to pick up the hose, but if your heart is about ready to explode, you're not gonna know it. So-
no, that's, well, we still have a physical policy. They would have to pass the physical to get on. Is that not true? Through the
that's
med
the
work?
pension physical,
Through med-
we'd be bringing somebody from within the pension, so that would not be the case.
Essentially just a gap analysis between the two, so at least we have the facts in front of us and we can make a logical decision.
Yeah, that's why I would hire somebody without giving them a physical.
Okay, so I can see here is a concern.
And maybe, I'm sorry, and maybe that 1 year for the 1582 is within 90 days, so that it's even more relevant information. So just things like that to think about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now, we have a concern for people who are actually working and doing whatever to bring them in. We don't seem to have that same concern for the people we have on board. If we're not doing the annual physical for our own people, and we don't have an annual CPAC, right? Once they come in, they don't need it. Isn't there a little
And we've had
missing
trouble
space
passing
here
wellness
that we're
program
requiring
issues like that, so.
excessive or additional that we don't require for the people that we have?
Well, that's a good point. That's a collective bargaining issue, but we did have that for our part-time people. And not in a policy way, but if they wanted to be a full-time here, they had to keep that CPAT current.
Right.
And it
To be
expires
hired
every
as
year,
full-
so they had to
They
be.
did not
they
have
had
to keep
be
it
sure.
current. They had to have it card in hand at time of employment. So
Right.
1 year, within a year, whatever it was, if they were part-time firefighter for 2 years, it could have expired, so they have to have a new one.
Correct.
Okay.
In order
And I
to be
think that's the
considered
way.
for full-time, they had to have it. It was up to them to maintain it. If they-
Only to meet their conditional offer requirements. So they could get the conditional offer and then go out and get a current one, essentially.
Right.
So yeah, they could let it last for a period of time.
But yeah, my concern, that I'm saying, and I'm not sure, I think the physical seems a little better way to go, but I will defer.
Well,
It just seems that if we're gonna want it for most people, why don't we have it for people we have, so.
You will actually be seeing that as part of our NOVAC performance audit recommendations.
Fit for duty was one of the goals that we
We'll be talking about that as well.
assigned. Okay, if you can bring that gap analysis back, and then we'll
Yes, sir.
go from there.
Related to that, I had just kind of one general question about department work rules. Obviously, the approval is necessary by the board through the township handbook. I was curious, though, what your thoughts were on minor edits and revisions. So generally de minimis changes, formatting, headers, footers, if something gets changed in an order. Typically, the way I would track that would be as a minor revision. So it would go from version 1.0 to say 1.1 if headers and footers changed. Does that level need to come back before the board, or is it the substantive language that would need secondary board approval?
I think so, I would prefer substantive changes to come back for approval, just,
You don't want
Formatting.
punctuation, grammar, minor spelling.
I don't think that's necessary.
Can he just do one for his own comparison reasons and?
And that's what you're saying. He's saying,
Changing handbook.
if there's,
track the
the way
changes,
this is
everything like that.
formatted, is this different than the way everything else is formatted, or is this formatted the way we
This
currently
is
do?
formatted the way we've been formatting it.
Right.
It is slightly different than the Grice recommendation. It is different than the handbook. So we don't have a common formatting schema in the township. at this
So what you're asking is, if we, whatever, you have a formatting now. If we decide to township-wide have one single formatting policy, how we
Which would
do
be a great
everything.
idea, I think.
Which I think is the right way.
Right. Then reformatting this, if this is not the one that's chosen, would that constitute something that has to come back before the board?
Yeah,
Just to redo it? I don't think so. I mean, in my opinion, that you haven't changed anything except
as
the
it's
way
not
the
a
number is
substantive
called,
change.
how it is, and you can find it, the page.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, if it would help, I'll bring an example. Basically, I changed some header footer, and then I changed the way the dates were laid out for legibility purposes, especially dealing with labor management issues. So how about I bring a revision 1.1 and a revision 1.0 for you?
Okay.
You can evaluate if that meets what you would think would be an acceptable, and then if
Fine.
it is, then we can make that. So,
Okay.
all right, I will bring that for you. This is actually not on the bi-weekly report, but I can hand it to you. These are the 13 points of light. Going into the budget meeting and our prior discussion, I printed it off for the board. There's one for Ms. Aaron's there also. These are the accumulated, not all 13 are this board specific, obviously. This basically goes back to the late 90s when we had started kind of changing to the modern way of how we were purchasing through the current board. So as you go through there, you'll probably see some of the questions that have been asked of us over time, but some of it predates. So it seems like it may be kind of obvious stuff. It's like, for example, purchase request, but that's why it's on there. Those are all the things that we're currently putting together for the board for that.
Okay. If we can maybe take this and just review it and maybe submit any recommendations back.
I just wanted to go back. I think there was a motion made and pending on the lateral entry hiring that,
So we're going to withdraw that.
Well, that,
You're gonna wanna do
move to
something.
table,
We can move to table that
move to table the motion to our next meeting.
yeah, I just thought you'd do something because that motion was out there.
to a future meeting. Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's to this, so, yeah.
That was the motion regarding approval of adopting this lateral entry hiring
So we were
policy.
discussing under that motion.
So now we have a motion from Ms. Graff to table it.
Yeah.
Do I have a second for that?
She made a motion, table. I'll take a
table.
second. I'll second.
Call.
Ms. Graff?
Yes.
Mr. Paxson?
Yes.
We just have to remember to
Yes.
untable it at the next meeting.
Thank you.
So it needs to be on the agenda.
Right.
Okay.
Your old business.
And then a few things just to highlight for you for the biweekly activity report. The first was the full-time transition is complete, and the parts that aren't complete are well in process as far as the conditional offers. As a matter of fact, firefighter Sims, I believe, is going to be our first conditional offer to full-time person at the end of this month. So he's actively studying and has a pretty good support system to get his medics passed. So that is well on its way. And again, I want to thank the board for your support in moving that way. It's a huge step for us, but an important one and a timely one. So thank you for that. The PSISN board meeting, there have been a number of discussions. I'll be getting a summary of where we're at to Mr. Zahari to send to the board. We're getting close to the point in time where we're going to be asked to approve a new memorandum of understanding, and we need to get you up to speed on what it says and get your thoughts and comments on it. You'll likely be getting a visit from Sheriff Fisher and perhaps Chief Evers at some point to discuss it as well, and maybe even a county commissioner too. There's a lot of discussion going on at this point. So we will have a briefing packet for you so you're well informed of the issues. The major trainings, and this is just more an item of interest, as you've been driving along, you may have seen guys in yellow suits slipping and sliding out on the pond. So they have completed their annual ice training. The ice was good for us this year, had about 4 inches in the center of the pond. So they were able to complete all their training requirements for that and are moving forward with our training calendar for 2015. So other than that, if there's any questions for the board,
I had one request on item H, if you can, on future bi-weeklies, if you can strike the staff time to complete these has been delayed by the Novak study. If you
yes,
can,
I'm sorry, I left it as a boilerplate, so I don't forget to do the report.
It's been on there since October, and then if you can also modify it to where it says is still working on, if you can just say that is working on it, will have complete by
Yes, sir.
a certain date, whatever that date is, just so we can close that item. And whether it's July or whether it's February 2nd, just so we can put that one to rest.
I will do that, sir.
Okay. Any other questions for Chief?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Legal advisor?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to advise the board, I had been invited by myself and if Mr. Parks wanted to, by the prosecutor's office to meet with the Greene County coroner. They've invited legal counsel for all the local jurisdictions. Apparently the coroner wants to discuss with council and the people that deal with it within the jurisdictions, the indigent and unclaimed bodies issues that he is dealing with. I advised them that we had a meeting and it was at 4 o'clock today. I didn't know if I could make it, but also that we did actually have a policy in place. But I also wanted to make sure that if we are done by 4 and I go, that the board is okay with that. If they have a problem with it, to see what it is that they're wanting to discuss. And I'm not sure about Mr. Park's availability. I let him know, but if
So the question is,
Authorize
we-
legal to participate in that.
yeah, I don't see any problem.
Okay.
Move to, if you need a motion,
I don't know that I need a motion.
Yeah,
No,
direction.
I wanted you all to be aware of it and
you're
didn't
in,
want to just go.
just in the discussion, and we already have an issue, policy, and if the policy needs to be changed, both of you bring it back to us to indicate what we need to do.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else from legal?
No.
Okay. Trustees? Mr. Paxson?
We're just looking forward to our meetings on Thursday and Friday. Thursday at 1 and Friday at 2.
And there was an inventory item under fiscal office.
There is, according to Ohio Revised Code, Section 50504, the inventory needs to be turned in the second Monday of January in duplicate, one copy to the fiscal officer and one copy to the county engineer. That has been done last Monday, so I just have a resolution letting you know that that's been done.
Okay. Do you need to read this resolution?
Just the first couple
So
lines.
that's
is fine.
presented.
Okay. Make a motion to, resolution to accept the inventory.
I'll put the whole thing in there, so.
Okay.
Just inventory as
Yeah,
presented.
the inventory is presented by the fiscal office for 2015, January 20, 2015.
Second, and does that include the inventory for the entire township? Right.
There was 200 and some pages.
However, right.
Yeah. Any more discussion? No. Mr. Paxton?
Yes.
Ms. Graff?
Yes.
Mr. Kretz?
Yes,
That's all I have, thank you.
thank you. Legal invoices.
Move to approve.
I have one question on this one,
Good.
and it was this one right here. Review documents from you and begin search. What documents would those be?
I don't remember.
I don't know, I haven't seen it.
Okay, then I won't recommend we pay that one until we figure out what those are.
If you want me, if it's one of mine, I could probably tell you.
Which I was trying, that was his first question. December 4th. Oh, that may, I think that's to her. Do you want to start with
There's some
these?
documents in there that,
You want to review that one?
Did you know which ones you mean? That's a,
December 4th,
December 4th.
review documents.
I think it relates to the item above that, the draft position description and the draft contract.
Okay,
Because initially you had some correspondence, and then I was reviewing the actual documents that you forwarded to the board and
okay.
to me.
I have to go back through my notes, but sounds logical. So,
When he forwarded that all to everyone, I think it was from you had received it, I believe, or somebody had received it from Mr. Ansball's office.
Okay.
And then it got forwarded on.
Okay, oh, with comments.
I thought we operated as a board, so.
Well, I think he sent it to the board and myself. I was copied on the email.
Sure.
So
Well, and we do operate as a board, but we also contact attorneys.
that's where I'm confused as.
I could tell you exactly. I can look it up right now.
And my sent box doesn't go back that far, it deletes.
would it be a sent or be a receipt?
I don't know.
If we receive something from what, from Doug? December 4th?
No, I only go back to the 22nd.
No, I only go back, maybe, I only go back to
I
the
mean, I can go back and check
29th.
on it and see.
Yeah,
I would like to.
I can't remember if my email
Sure.
is deleted back, or all of
Oh,
my.
here it is, right here.
Because that,
Um,
because that was, the date on that was what?
The 4th.
Yeah, I can, after the meeting, if you want, I can show you the email, or I can show it to you right now.
Okay, and the
Okay.
fourth, the reason I say that is because the fourth, Ms. Graff was the board, president of the board now, Ms. Kretz.
Sure, I can show you. It was copied to
I'm not sure what that has to do with it, but go ahead.
Ms. Graff and Mr. Paxton.
Okay, could you forward it to us?
Sure.
If we forward to us, we can look at it now.
Well, there's the correspondence,
Well, it would have everything on it. I can forward it to you.
Yeah, it's not like anything's hidden. We don't hide it from each other, you know.
I mean, that's why you present these to me, is to look and approve them, and okay, I can
No
have
problem.
questions, I
Yeah.
can have questions on it.
Let's start with the ones that everybody signed off on. We can get those approved while she's forwarding
Move
that.
to approve an invoice from Sir Dowd and Turner, invoice number 68067 for $228.
Second.
Call?
Ms. Graff,
Yes?
Mr. Paxton, Mr. Krebs.
Yes.
Move to approve invoice number 2428-001-1021 from NPK&H for $705.80.
Second.
Ms. Graff,
Yes?
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Krebs.
Yes.
Received the email here.
We did.
Yes. Mine came, I assume yours came too. And there were 3 documents here.
Looks logical to me. Yeah, that was simply, essentially reiterating what we had directed in executive session. Thank you. And did not review that one, if you want to review that one.
Okay. Did he sign off on it? No.
Not yet. Do you recall it now?
That's essentially the only request.
It was essentially taking what Mr. Anspaugh sent and flipping it to. Okay.
Okay, move to approve invoice number 68068 to Sir Dowd and Turner for $5,966.69.
Ms. Graff,
Yes?
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Krebs.
Yes. And here's the resolution. Anything else to come before the board? Seeing none, may I ask for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.